Hello everyone, and today I'm actually coming at you with a question. So I recently put up a little post there about whether or not people preferred the synchro or the branded version of Buster Blader, and I got a couple of mixed responses. Not too many people have responded thus far, but it basically raised the same question with me about Thunder Dragon. So that's what we're going to be exploring today. We're going to be showing a deck profile for both pure sort of Chaos Thunder Dragons as well as a branded Thunder Dragon deck, showing a few games and replays with both, and sort of putting the idea out there as to whether or not the branded Thunder Dragon is actually the better way of playing it, or if playing it pure still holds more merit. So if you want to see more things like this in the future, or just anything in general that we would do on the channel, feel free to subscribe. Again, it doesn't cost you anything and it does help me out, and you can tell me below which of the two you preferred, and as well as that, if perhaps there are some changes you would make to either list. Both of them are very strong. They both sort of play very different ways, and it does feel like very different decks. I'm more partial towards the pure version of it myself. It just gives the deck more identity. It feels like I'm playing Thunder Dragons, but that's not to discount the power and competitive edge that branded would also bring to the deck. So I'm looking forward to see what you guys have down below. You can probably see the deck profiles behind me as it is, but we'll be exploring them both in a wee bit more detail towards the end. So let's get into game number one. Already getting into game one, and if you haven't figured it out, we are playing the branded Thunder Dragons in this version of it, going up against at Ignisters, which is interesting. It's not a deck you see very often. Typically their objective is to go into the Arrival Cybers if they open a really strong hand, but it's not always super easy for them to do, so they're going to go Dark Infant here and then into AI Land. Basically their combos, it's just a bunch of extended, really. We're going to sort of speed through it a wee bit. They're going to go into Cyber's Wicked here, then I Meet You is going to reveal Dark Templar to add the Dark Ignister to their hand, which they can now summon. Wicked, banish one to then activate its effect. I believe it resurrects one from the graveyard, I want to say. Adds back the hand. It comes to Transcode Talker. Transcode Talker, then I believe they're not too far from the end of their play here. They're going to summon the Achichi, they're going to resurrect the Wicked, then these two are going to summon out the Decode Talker Heat Soul, and I believe our opponent just, sets one passage to us. So our opponent wasn't able to go into the Arrival Cybers, which is fine. Their monsters here are boosting each other up by a 500 attack points, and this one is protecting both from being targeted. So while it's not, the most intimidating board in the world, it's still something. Our opponent here top decks, they go for the Max C, but luckily we top deck the Ash Blossom. They're going to pay another 1,000 to draw another card off of the Heat Soul, so that means their Heat Soul is now officially a draw 2. Pot of Greed there, so Max C gets negated, and we have a really solid hand. So we're going to use Thunder Dragon right off the bat just to see if he had an Ash Blossom himself, which he did, and he decides to use it now. Not always the greatest negate in the world. You don't really want to be stopping a Thunder Dragon with your Ash Blossom, but I just wanted to use this as an example to sort of show off what the deck can do. We branded Fusion now, except we don't. Our opponent goes for the Solemn Judgment, pays half their life points to stop our play dead in its tracks. So that does sort of slow us down quite heavily. So what do you do under these situations? Well, this is where having the deck mixed does come in handy. We're going to discard Dark to add another Dark from our deck to our hand. Going to banish a Light and a Dark from the graveyard to summon out the Thunder Dragon Duo, which will then tribute for Colossus. So that's where this deck sort of comes in and sort of picks up the slack a little bit for branded, because the branded play, a lot of it revolves around the usage of branded fusion. The deck becomes a lot weaker if the branded fusion gets stopped. Thunder Dragons being able to almost autonomously go into boss monsters like the Thunder Dragon Colossus and the Titan really patches up that weakness. So all we needed was a Light in the Dark in the grave. We summon out the Thunder Dragon Duo, and because we used a Thunder effect in hand, we could simply tribute it for the Colossus, which is fine. Now we're going to tribute both to go into Thunder Dragon Titan. His cards are immune to being targeted. They are not immune to being destroyed, and we intend to end this game this turn. Discard the Roar to add back one of the cards from our graveyard back to our hand. Pop with the Titan. We're going to add back the Thunder Dragon that was banished earlier. Going to activate Thunder Dragon, discard, activate Titan again. Basically, Thunder Dragon Titan is every time you activate a Thunder effect in hand, like your Thunder Dragons discard themselves, you pop a card non-targeting, get rid of the field spell, final Thunder Dragon, activates Titan again, and now we're going to get rid of his Decode Talker. Bang, all three of them are gone, 1800 life points left, lethal. So yes, our opponent didn't exactly play optimally there. Let's not pretend that was a perfect win. However, it does show off not only what the branded plays are in there. You've got the triple Aliber, the branded fusion, being able to go into what would essentially be a full Mirror Jade and Guardian Chimera setup. That was possible with that hand, but at the same time, even when that was stopped, we were still able to go into lethal off of the Thunder Dragon Duo and the autonomy then of the Thunder Dragon Titan and the Thunder Dragon engine. So that I wanted to show that off just as an example of how they sort of patch up each other's weaknesses a little bit. But again, straightforward enough game against a weak-ish opponent, to be perfectly honest. Let's get into game number 2. Alright, game 2, and we're sort of seeing a bit of a different hand. We are going first this time, which is of course different. We're going to summon out Alibur, the Jester of Despia, to grab Branded in red to our hand. Now we're going to Branded fuse out Lebellion the Searing Dragon. Lebellion the Searing Dragon discarding the Thunder Dragon Dark, which was, in hindsight, a bit of a misplay. One of the best bits of synergy between Despia and Thunder Dragons is Branded in red banishing the materials for the fusion from your hand. So it would have been smarter for us to bite the bullet and get rid of one of our hand traps to keep the Thunder Dragon Colossus, so that later on, whenever we use the Branded in red, we can use the Thunder Dragon Dark as material. But again, small misplay. It is what it is. Lebellion into Mirror Jade, the Ace Blade Dragon, set 2 and pass. So again, this is pretty much standard Despia Albaz as well. So not only is your deck capable of the full sort of play when it comes to Thunder Dragons, it's also capable of the full Branded Despia play. So our opponent's going to go for the Adventure Engine here, banishing the Water Enchantress in the graveyard to grab themselves a Rite of Aramasir. They're going to activate the Rite of Aramasir right off the bat. We do have removal options, but we're not too worried about them right now. They're going to add Draco back to their hand off of that at this stage. Well, sorry, upon the activation of their Theaters, when we decide to get rid of this, because ultimately we don't really want this token hanging around here, and we're trying to set ourselves up so that we banish the token off of Mirror Jade, then we immediately flip the Branded in red to stop him from using this field spell as well. So that was our plan basically. We flip up the Branded in red, but he's got Cross-Eyed Designator. He's also playing the Branded in red in his deck, so he's able to banish it from his to negate ours. So the Branded in red combo ended up not really working out for us anyway. And now we don't have a Mirror Jade banish, which is of course not that great for us. Lebellion here discarding Draco back. We were going to use the Effect Veiler. Luckily we had the Veiler still in hand to negate Lebellion, and down he goes. Now, not the most climactic of endings, but again, it's so difficult to find good games. This was at the end of so this was in Diamond. This was at the end of the October ladder. The next couple of games are at the beginning of November, so it's like a day apart. But it was just so difficult to get decent replays with so many people auto-scooping the moment their play went up in flames. Basically, we negate the Lebellion, comes back around the R turn. We pretty much win from there, let's be real. So yes, that is Branded. So you got a chance to see the Thunder Dragon engine and sort of how it can complement Branded, as well as the fact that the deck is more than capable of going into the full Mirror Jade sort of Branded and red plays in and of itself. So now what we're going to do is have a look at the pure sort of chaos-ish version of the deck. Alright, getting into game 1 for our Thunder Dragons, well, game 3 of the video. We have an interesting hand. So this is something you'll notice, the Chaos version. This isn't a great opening hand, but we're playing against what, set 2, Desires, set 2. I can only imagine some sort of Floodgate deck. So we draw for turn. We got the Lupin, which is good. We're going to activate Allure of Darkness, draw 2, banish one of the spare Lupin, that's fine. Allure of Darkness, draw 2, and we top deck into the Thunder Dragon Dark, which automatically makes this hand phenomenal. Having the Allure of Darkness and the Thunder Dragon Dark in the same hand is amazing because it banishes for cost, and then you add the Hawk back to hand. Hawk discards itself and goes to revive the Thunder Dragon Dark, but unfortunately our opponent's got that Ghost Bell, so unfortunately we're not using our Hawk's effect this time. That's not great, but we still do have the ability to banish the Hawk to summon out the Collapse Serpent link into Striker Dragon, so we can search our deck for the White Dragon Wyver Burster. Then we can summon the White Dragon and link off into the Union Carrier. Now we're gonna basically normal summon the Aloof Lupine, banish the Roar. Our plan was to banish the Duo to banish the Roar from the deck, so then we can use the Roar to go into Colossus and then have our full setup. Unfortunately, that's not how this is going to fan out here. Our opponent's going to send one to the grave to negate our aloof lupine, so no roar banish for us. We are, however, going to use Ready Fusion to summon out the Sea Monster of Theseus from our extra deck so we can synchro summon into Virtual World Kyuubi Shen Shen. So at the very least, we're also going to boost up our Union Carrier by 1000 using Matrix. The reason we're doing this is so that during our opponent's turn, whenever they inevitably destroy Union Carrier, the Matrix going to the graveyard will trigger its effect to add another copy of Matrix from our deck to our hand, so we can use it on the following turn. So we're just setting ourselves up with some follow-up here. We have the Shen Shen, which is, you know, basically like a small dimensional fissure. Our opponent's just going to tribute our Union Carrier for a Kaiju. Why they didn't tribute Shen Shen is a little bit beyond me, but it is what it is. We're going to use Maxi to stop them from doing anything else. They go Tactics. We use Ash to negate. Again, we're not having our Shen Shen stolen on us, and that's it. So opponent 2 cards left in their hand. We had played through what, 3 or 4 interruptions. We still had a Shen Shen on board, and we had follow up for the next turn with the Matrix in hand, and that's it. And like I said, people are just scooping left, right, and center. But yes, the Shen Shen is not a card I had in my previous versions of this deck, but I think it's a really, really good addition, specifically for circumstances like this. Whenever you're stuck with just one of your level 4s on board and you want to make something good out of it, that is an option. You can also look for alternative levels and potentially exceed plays. Having Ready Fusion and Instant Fusion available to you as very viable cards does open up your options dramatically. Your creativity then when it comes to the implementation of your extra deck expands phenomenally. So what we'll do, good showing of game number 1, where we're getting interrupted super heavily. You know, we're getting hit with hand traps left, right, and center. Let's get into game number 2. Alrighty, game 2 here, and we have a slightly better hand here. Gold Sark is the best starter card in your deck. We were just testing them, see if he had Ash there. He's playing a bit of a 60 card stack, so we're not expecting him to. We're going to dump a second Thunder Dragon into the graveyard as materials. Discard a Hawk to resummon a Thunder Dragon. Now we're going to use our Gold Sark basically to banish our Roar. Again, we were just sort of testing him for hand traps sort of thing. Gold Sark is going to banish Roar from the deck. We probably could have worked on our sequencing a little bit better here. Roar summons out Thunder Dragon Dark from the deck, then we Link summon in the Union Carrier. Dark went into the graveyard, will grab our Thunder Dragon Fusion. Thunder Dragon Fusion shuffle back into the deck here to summon out our Colossus. Now the Union Carrier is going to equip onto our Colossus the Destruction Sword, Dragon Buster Destruction Sword. So our opponent cannot search their deck for cards, and they cannot use their extra deck. Plus we have a Ghost Spell and an Ash Blossom in our hand. Now where does this come in good? Thunder Dragon Colossus stops the majority of decks. Of course, every deck searches for cards, but also against certain matchups like Floanderies, immediately they cannot play the game. Unless, of course, they have something like, I don't know, an infinite impermanence. What are you going to do? Of course, that still means the Buster thing is up, but Floanderies, being what they are still going to be able to have something. Now, the only issue with Floanderies is that now that they've had to use their Imperm, they're a one-trick pony. You stop their Eaglin here. You always hold off on using your interruptions until I would say the Eaglin is the most important one, because this is the only one that searches a threatening card. Again, all Rabina and the other ones, all they're going to do is search for more copies of like the small ones. The only one that's going to search your deck for a threat is Eaglin. So save your negates. We still get a Ghost Spell there if our opponent decides to go into anything else like a Stray or whatever, and they're going to shuffle back 1. They got a Stray in their hand, but they can't summon it. Shuffle back 1, draw 1. No plays, unfortunately, and they pass the win to us. So I wanted to show this off just to get the core combo out there, to show you what Thunder Dragons are supposed to do. Again, impossible to get good replays because everyone just surrenders. Like, that's the thing you'll notice when you're using this deck. People will just surrender against you because if they're struggling to get past Colossus, if they don't have any non-destruction based removal for like the Titan, if they don't have the ability to play through multiple hand traps, they just sort of scoop up. There's not very much they can do about it. Our opponent opened up with a lucky Imperm, but they didn't have any plays past that. So what are you going to do? Let's get in, and we're going to talk briefly about the two decks, but we're not doing full deck profiles. Deck profiles are in the description. Alright, so again, the gameplay main objective was just to show off sort of how both decks function. I appreciate that they were sort of scooping up a little bit earlier than they probably should have. But again, it's very difficult to get good replays. But yes, they at least showed off how our deck worked, which is the main thing we were worried about. Now, the branded fusion branch of it is, honestly, that deck is more consistent. You're seeing them both on screen, I would imagine. the branded fusion version of it is definitely more consistent in terms of always having a play to make. You're almost always able to go into, if you open up any of your starter cards for the Despia engine, I think you play 6. You could potentially run that up to 8 if you want to use your branded opening as well. That's always an option. Gold Sark also can banish the tragedy in order to get searching, so you have a whole bunch of starter cards when it comes to the branded version, and you're almost always able to put out your Mirror Jade. Plus you can usually extend then into the likes of a Colossus in addition to a Mirror Jade, although that doesn't always happen. Although the main sort of benefits to the Thunder Dragon branded fusion up version of it is that Thunder Dragons help block up, they help fill the holes for when Despia fails. That's the whole point of that deck. As far as I can see, if you're trying to play it optimally, you're playing branded, and then when branded fails, you're playing Thunder Dragons. That's how you usually want to work it. You have a few different options for how that can go. They can usually come out and recover a board quite well. Other than that, you're simply just playing branded, and again, the instant fusion, ready fusion, and everything adds to that. You've got so many discard options when it comes to your Thunder Dragons, so that's what that version of the deck is ultimately doing. When it comes to the pure version of the deck, you're definitely looking more towards it's not quite as consistent, but it's more explosive, and the actual control aspect of it is much more prevalent. With the Colossus, you're locking them out of searching for all their cards. With the Buster Lock, you're locking them out of their extra deck. You're trying to put up a Shen Shen or a Baron de Fleur to give you additional negates or floodgates. So it's definitely a little bit more explosive, but there are more intricacies with how the deck works. You don't have as much room for hand traps. It's not quite as consistent for always having a play. You don't always have a play. So it depends on how heavily you want to take it. It definitely does feel more like pure Thunder Dragons. Like, honestly, it feels a lot more fun in my experience. I think I prefer playing that version of it. I just don't think it's quite as strong as the branded version, in my opinion. But if you want control over just outright attacking power, so the branded version brings a lot of power to the deck. The Thunder Dragon versions is a lot of control. So you're controlling your board, you're controlling what your opponent can and can't do. The Shen Shen, I think the Shen Shen in particular, I don't know why I wasn't playing this before in my previous versions of Thunder Dragons. I think this card is a really, really good fallback option, just to summon quickly off of basically your ready or instant fusions alongside one of your level 4s, of which you play plenty. You don't want to have an Aloof Lupine or one of your Chaos Dragons on your end board, but sometimes when you're trying to make your Hawk play or your Dark play or something like that, you get interrupted, and then you sort of struggle to recover unless you have a recovery option. You don't always want to go into Titan if you don't have anything to discard, so the Shen Shen is a really, really good middle ground, where it gives you a decent-ish floodgate, a recurring boss monster for if they manage to destroy it, and a decent amount of attack and defense. So it's at the very least something your opponent has to get rid of and poses a challenge, even in situations where your ideal plays have failed or you've bricked or you get interrupted. So that's the idea behind the two. Let me know down below which of them you prefer, and like if you would make any changes to these deck lists. These deck lists I'm playing are sort of changing all the time, but they're not changing by much. You know, you're just sort of like putting in like, oh, well, will I use opening? Won't I use opening? Will I use the Chaos Dragons? Am I using Chaos Creator? There's tons of different options you can do when it comes to these. Actual deck profiles for them, for the actual deck, if you want to learn how they work in detail, are in the description. There's a branded one and a pure one. I've posted on these decks quite a few times in the past, so they will give you detailed sort of breakdowns on how the deck works. But I hope that's sort of helpful. I mean, this hasn't really been a guide. This is more of like a discussion point. Like, let's see what you guys prefer, you know? Get out there, test them both out. If you have the materials to test them, if you've already built them in the past, test out both. Let me know what you think. And yeah, that's pretty much everything that I have to say on them right now. So I'll see you all in the next one.